Our brains actually are wired to make us overweight the risks of opening up. But what we need to realize is that silence is not safety. Silence is just as risky.
Today we're talking with Leslie John, author of the new book, Revealing, Harvard Business School professor and behavioral scientist. Leslie shares how we make decisions about vulnerability, when to share, what to share, and why we systematically get it wrong. We often overestimate the risks of opening up and ignore both the benefits of sharing and the costs of silence, keeping us stuck in surface-level relationships. She shares why you're holding back more than you realize, how emotional vocabulary creates instant connection, the dating profile mistake killing your matches, and when vulnerability actually elevates your leadership. Well, welcome to the show, Leslie. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I love it.
I'd love to just hear the backstory to the book because vulnerability is so important to building relationships. What drew your fascination to this project?
Yeah. Well, I like to call myself a recovering privacy expert.
Okay.
So I'm a nerd. I'm a behavioral scientist. And for the first probably 10 years of my career, I studied how people make decisions. I'm fascinated by how people make decisions, period. And I was really interested in how people make decisions about their personal information online, especially. And I kept finding, oh, we're such idiots online. Stop sharing when you shouldn't. Stop, tales would emerge again and again of Virgin Atlantic, for example, the flight attendants, they were venting on Facebook, which sounds so old to say now, and then they got fired. So there were all these examples, right? They're early 2000s. And so all my research was there's a mistake. We suck at this. And then though, I was finding it increasingly hard to suppress this side of me, my personal self. Okay. So is, I love Seinfeld, George Costanza, when he's the worlds are colliding.
Yeah.
So it was a series of moments like this where my professional life, I was stop doing this. And then my personal life, I am such an oversharer. I'm the one to blurt out, as in the book says, you're welcome, many embarrassing stories. So it's actually kind of a pastime of mine. And so I thought, wait, I know I'm making mistakes, but there's definitely upside to this. For sure there's upside. And then I started reinterpreting all of my research and thinking it's so narrow. It's not wrong, but it's not right either, Of course we make lots of mistakes online, but the more interesting story is why in everyday life we reveal and why we don't reveal and what that gets us. And so then I became just so fascinated with every day these disclosure decisions we make. Every day we make them. A lot of times we don't realize we make them, which is a problem. But so I'm a recovering privacy expert and I'm a card-carrying oversharer.
Well,
and self-actualized.
I've lived through that. So, as a millennial, seeing online, everyone thought it's just friends, family, so share.
Right.
And I look back now, my Instagram feed and my Facebook feed, and the stuff I was saying back then, I thought was going to be private eyes. And now I'm a bit of a public figure. And it's oh, wow, I did overshare online. And now we're kind of swinging the other way where we aren't sharing enough to even create the vulnerability for connection.
Exactly. And there's a lot of irony, too, with the online situation where, if something is troubling you, it can sometimes feel easier to just broadcast something, right? Because you don't have someone there kind of maybe judging you.
Right.
And there's lots of people, so maybe someone will respond. But that actually is not a very good way of coping and processing difficult things. It's kind of ironic because it's often really easy to, and social media wants us to do this.
Right.
But then it's not a very good form of sharing. It's not therapeutic to us. So it's the in-person, in real life that we need to be doing a lot more of, in my view.
I think with that, I was just reading a Reddit thread this morning about savings for retirement. And it was this me in real life post, which was, I have no savings for retirement. I'm in my 50s. And there was someone in the comments who was painted this stark picture of where they are and all the trauma they've been through that got to the situation where they have nothing for retirement. And there were so many people just rushing in to share and commiserate around this exact feeling. And he ended his post saying, like, I don't have anyone in real life that I could share this with.
Wow.
Like, this is the only spot that I feel comfortable sharing on Reddit.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And for him, it was helpful and supportive.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to how, like, finding your audience and community is really important, right? Like, we want to be a little more focused than just broadcasting something. And it sounds like he maybe found, like, the right Reddit forum to find people that could help him. But you also have to be careful of these echo chambers that then you're not getting the right support that's
and
actually
feedback.
Helpful, right? You're getting stuff that's reinforcing your spiral sometimes.
I think from my perspective, you know, if he was a client of mine, I would challenge him to be more open about this with friends and family because there's probably other people in his life who've gone through it or going through it, experiencing it, and he could have that in-person emotional support that he needs.
Right.
And so many of our clients share too little information, TLI.
Yeah, TLI, exactly.
They hold back. Maybe it's their perfectionism. Maybe it's their social anxiety that leads to them struggling to have those deeper connections in their life.
And so someone you're coaching, like you say, that they need to open up more. How, like, if they say, okay, I'm an alien from Mars, like, how do they, I think that some people, they understand the concept, but like they're like, what do I do?
Stories.
Yeah.
Anecdotes.
Love
just like we were
it.
doing before we started on air, sharing some kid stories for both of our experiences with newborn. I think that is the way, the story, without saying, hey, I have no money for retirement, or hey, I'm going through this awful thing. The story allows you to share a bit of that, add some vulnerability, and become more relatable.
Completely. Stories, I mean, we've evolved to learn by storytelling, right? We don't, which is kind of ironic as a scientist, because when we write scientific papers, it is robotic.
Very.
And, you know, the modal number of citations for a scientific paper is 0. Like, nobody reads it. Like, we put all this work into dotting our I's and dotting our T's, and then, like, for what? And so that was a really big learning for me when I wrote the book, because I worked with an amazing developmental editor who actually writes memoirs, and I call her ruthlessly brilliant. She would just be like, cut the study walkthrough. No, story. And so it really made me think much deeper and more richly about the topic too. Then you see the nuance, because in science we're like so constrained that sometimes we miss the forest from the trees. And then I started talking to more people and learning their stories and learning about my stories that I'd suppressed. Yeah.
Well, that's what I enjoyed about the book. I find that we get a lot of books and a lot of guests come on the show and we try to consume as much as possible. But so often the stories are other people's experiences.
Yeah.
It's like you can only hear the Benjamin Franklin story so many times with all the different ways that it fits your science. So to have you revealing in the book, I thought was really impactful.
Thank you. I mean, how can you write a book about revealing and not reveal? It was so meta. And then as I was writing the book, I'm like, is this too much? Is this too little? Like, where's the line? And I think that's also part of the point that you got to experiment, try things on. You're not always going to get it right. Hopefully, I mostly got it right.
Well, let's unpack that further. So for those in our audience and our clients as well who are that too little information, cards too close to the chest, how do we know when we're holding them too close? What are some things we should pay attention to?
That's a great point. The great question. So I think what it's going to feel like if you're an undersharer, it's going to feel like you're over-communicating. One of the things that, without hesitation, I can say almost all of us should do more of is sharing our feelings. And I know there may be like, share your feelings, but like truly, if you're in a meeting, so my amazing hairstylist was just telling me this story about how she was in a meeting at her PTA, my kids aren't in grade school yet, so that acronym is Parent Teacher Association. Yep. And it was not going so well, and it was tense. And she said, because she'd read my book, she said, I shared that I was feeling frustrated. And then the whole thing changed. And so, like, it humanizes you, and and then it turns out other people are also feeling frustrated, and then it was just a total game changer. So I would say if you're feeling something really strong, so it does require self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of step one. And then step two, you're feeling really strong. You need to let it out some way. And then it's a question of what's the appropriate forum, right? Because the book is not say anything to anyone. It's finding the right person, the right confidant, the right situation.
Well, with that, I think a big part of it is also extending your emotional vocabulary.
100%.
Because if you're using the same emotions over and over again,
Yes.
I'm happy,
Yes.
I'm sad,
Yes.
it becomes less
Completely.
connectable to those who've heard these stories from us. So if we're
Yeah.
trying to get extra vulnerable with people that we're already close with, that's usually the safest place to start.
Yes.
Add emotional vocabulary.
Yes.
What is that anger? What's
Yes.
behind it?
Yes. So I'm also a recovering emotional illiterate.
A lot of confessions today.
I
You're
know.
revealing a lot.
A lot of recovering, a lot of growth, all the things. So I think it's my generation of growing up was, also like stiff upper lip. Nobody talked about feelings. I mean, I had a wonderful childhood. I'm super grateful to my parents. You can't get everything right. And coming from their generation was even more guarded. So I did not. I learned only like in my 30s that I did not have a good emotional vocabulary. For example, I was talking to my therapist, and he said, "Well, what are you feeling?" And I kept listing thoughts. He's like, "Those are cognitions.
Right.
What are you feeling?" And I'm like, "Sad." And it was just so basic, the emotions. And then he literally, I have one in the book, handed me an emotion wheel, which is such an amazing tool. So you start in the middle, the core is like the basic emotions, like sadness, anger, joy. There's kind of 4 basic ones, and then it breaks out. You can distill further. So it's kind of like choose your own adventure. Like, I feel angry, and then you can refine it.
Right.
The more you go out, you can refine it. And that process of articulating your feelings, putting them into words, even if no one's listening, in and of itself is super, super helpful to you, because it's like a different, instead of the lizard brain animal part of you being like, oh, ruminating and freaking out, when you have to put those feelings into words, it activates the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain. So it literally like gives you an outside perspective, which helps you calm down.
And they're universal.
They're universal.
So if we talk about vulnerability,
Yes.
what is universal to all of us is that emotional wheel.
Yes.
We've experienced all of those, or we will experience all of those emotions.
Yeah.
So if you want to be more charismatic, if you want to connect with more people, to be able to extend your emotional vocabulary, that's that piece of vulnerability that actually creates connection.
Yeah.
We might have different stories of how we got here, how many kids we have, what the experience has been with a colicky baby, not peaceful baby, whatever that is. But the emotion tied to those experiences, everyone can relate.
They're universal.
Even
completely.
people listening who aren't parents can relate to feeling that emotion.
Completely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I always say with our clients, like, figure out the emotion, start there, and then paint the picture behind that emotion. And now you got a great story.
Yeah. And the other thing about the story is that when we tell stories, because we're so natural at doing it, there's naturally some kind of sense to it. There's a challenge, there's a ending. It doesn't necessarily have to be a happy ending, but there's some kind of ending. And that process of narrating your life, kind of putting a story on it, helps you make sense of it, and it helps you get through difficult things. And it's, of course, not just about getting through difficult things. You also, when you can better articulate your emotions, you also, I have found it's easier to relate to others, and you can empathize with others better, right? Because you have a more sophisticated view.
And you just attract more people to you when you have that larger emotional vocabulary.
Yeah, totally.
Because when you pick on one of those refined emotions that really strike the chord, when someone hears that,
when
they're
they
like,
nail
yes,
it, you're like,
too.
yeah, that one, totally.
exact thing.
And then they feel so understood. And when we feel understood, that is such a powerful connector. In fact, there's fascinating studies on how people would rather feel understood, warts and all, than kind of idealized. So there's studies of marriages where, so suppose I have low self-esteem, hypothetically, and my husband realizes that, and he's like, Les, I know you have low self-esteem, like recognizes it, versus the situation where my husband says, you are such a power boss, like you're like always confident, you're amazing. That the marriages where the spouse actually really, really gets the person and the person knows that they get them, they're actually longer lasting than those where the spouse just kind of idealized. So really feeling understood is such a powerful connector.
Yeah, and recognizing then when you're hearing other people's stories. So maybe you're not the one who's sharing. A lot of our
Right.
clients are introverts.
Right.
But
Me
if you're
too. I'm
hearing
also an
someone
introvert.
else's story and you pick up on that emotion and you with
Yeah.
your emotional vocabulary can call out that emotion,
Yeah.
they feel understood. They feel
Completely.
validated.
And then what are they going to do? Then they're going to open up to you more. And then we're going to do the dance of reciprocity where one person shares, another shares, and you kind of gradually deepen as far as you want to go.
Right.
And there you're off to the races.
So that, to me, kind of gets at the core of like, how do I expand my ability to be vulnerable, getting in
Yes.
tune with those emotions, and then being able to communicate
Completely.
those emotions?
Completely. Yeah. So I think self-awareness is number one, which is, I don't say that in a glib way because it really is, it really is fundamental, and it's actually harder than it seems to become self-aware, right? We need
Right.
that's a whole other thing. But then once we're self-aware, how do we actually get it out and express ourselves, and how do we take that risk? And I think what I want people to know is we are so scared of TMI, right? That like gut-wrenching disclosure hangover, the like feeling the next day of, oh my God, I said too much, which also you're welcome. There are stories of that in there. And so we live in fear of TMI. And so when we're thinking, even if we're considering opening up, which we often don't even do, but suppose we're already there and we've listened to this podcast, we're a client of yours, and we're thinking, okay, I make all these decisions, maybe I should open up more. The tricky thing is that we don't consider these decisions, right? I'm a decision scientist nerd. We don't consider them in an even-handed way.
Yeah.
We massively overweight the risks of revealing. When I put people in situations and I ask them, hey, you're struggling with ADHD. If you tell your boss, you'll get a commendation. Should you tell your boss? Hey, you have a sexual fantasy. Should you tell your partner? Whatever the disclosure dilemma, right? These are things that we don't know whether to share it or not. Then when I say, what's on your mind, the number one thing, like by a landslide, is the risk of revealing.
Absolutely.
And what people, right, of course it's relatable. What people don't consider, they don't consider the benefit of the revealing.
The upside,
they don't
your
consider
partner being into it, your boss being like, oh,
being
absolutely,
understood,
me too.
100%. You don't, and the risks are real. Don't get me wrong. You almost completely neglect the downsides of concealing, the rumination, the fact that your partner won't understand you, that there will be this distance between you, the fact that you're going to be flailing at work and your boss is just going to think you're incompetent, as opposed to, hey, you can perform like a badass when you have the support, right? So, and it's because there's something deep in our brains, the way our brains work. I actually went right into like neuroscience on this because I'm like, ooh, interesting rabbit hole. And our brains actually are wired to make us overweight the risks of opening up. And so what we need
to keep us safe.
Right. But what we need to realize is that silence is not safety. Silence is just as risky, right? There's so many harms that come from not sharing. And so I think the more you realize that these are decisions you face all the time, the more you can experiment with being just a little bit more open. Because when you do that, you will then see the benefits.
Right.
And then you realize, oh, if I stay silent, the risks are I miss out on all this good stuff. So for example, one easy way to start, because I know, like, talk about your feelings, that's a bit heavy to start with. I mean, now I'm like, I will talk about feelings forever. My children, my boys. I'm like, I think I'm doing the opposite.
Yeah.
But like, you always screw your kids up in some way. I'm screwing them up, but it will be a different way. It won't be the same way I'm screwed up.
We're course correcting.
Right. Maybe overdoing it, but that's okay. What are you feeling? It's okay. But no, sorry. Feelings got me all worked up. So, okay, an easier way, kind of a nice low-hanging fruit to try starting these things is something that we often undershare in real life, this is all real life, is praise. So think of like all of the things you admire of people that go unsaid, right? And so even saying, I said to a new acquaintance at a dinner, I said, I like you. So that's vulnerable, right? We never do that. But that's a great way to start sharing praise because it's not that risky. And it's almost always, unless it's something sexist or whatever, we're going to not do that. But it's almost always well received.
Absolutely.
Right? And then once you feel it, you have to do it. Doing it is believing, right? You can't just be told to share more. You have to do it. And then you start realizing, oh, wow. If I tell my husband what's really on my mind and that it bothers me that he's so neurotic about the toilet paper being put on the right way, just saying, then if I tell him that, then we can work through it and we can come to a better agreement. And then I can understand also why he cares so much about that. And then I realize, it's important to him. So maybe I shouldn't be such a jerk about it, right? So it all starts with, and I give the toilet paper example because it's often like the most mundane, silly things. They seem silly. And then we censor because we're like, it's just the toilet paper. I'm overreacting. But no, your feelings are valid. And if it keeps coming up, like, talk about it.
I think in that vein, for a lot of us, these stories, right? So recognizing that stories now convey emotion.
Yeah.
There's a recency to them that carries a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
So my business partner, Johnny, always says, either you're sharing your story or someone's writing your story for you.
100%.
So when we withhold from our boss,
yeah,
we're not sharing that story. He's writing the story that we're a low performer, that we're not paying attention, that we don't care about our work.
Yes.
Versus us writing the story, no, I care so much about my work that the struggle with ADHD is impacting it, and it's important that I let you know that.
Yep.
Totally different story.
Yep.
But every one of us as humans, we are writing stories about other people.
Right.
We are not looking at their numbers, their data. We're writing stories about them. They are this person because I experienced them this way.
We do it so effortlessly without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I love that reframe. That's a great reframe because it's like, if you don't tell your story, someone else will.
And then that story for you, okay, maybe the recency of it has a lot of impact. Like, if I share this vulnerability, I'm going to be judged because this just happened yesterday. So maybe for you, the challenge is we'll share a story from your childhood that we've moved past. It's slightly embarrassing.
Right.
And we can all have some fun with because we've all been there.
Exactly.
And that creates an opportunity for vulnerability that's maybe not yesterday or last month where you feel more harshly judged.
Yes. And it's not so raw. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Now let's talk about some phenomenon that we've experienced with our clients who try to join the online dating sphere, the rise of online dating.
Love this topic.
And how oversharing is often regarded as a way to meet the right person, to find the right match. But science actually says something different here.
Yeah. So, all the dating tips. I love it. Okay. So, and I had already found my Prince Charming when I wrote this, but like I was going back to my dating days when I was in my mid-30s. So I'm studying. I'm a huge disclosure nerd, and I'm studying this stuff, and I'm going on dates all the time. So I'm thinking, like, what should I put on my profile? How much? What's too much? What's too little? And it turns out that, some of our instincts are a little bit wrong here. In the beginning, when we're writing a profile, when we're trying to attract a mate at the very beginning, less is more. And the tendency is often, right, to kind of like throw it all and hope something sticks, right?
Right.
But the problem with that is what's called a dissimilarity cascade, which means that, so when you put a lot of stuff about yourself, a suitor will see stuff that they can relate to, the things that they're similar, because it turns out similarity breeds liking more than opposites attract. Opposites can be fun for short term, but let's assume we're looking for long term.
Right.
Okay, so they see stuff that's similar, great. But then they see stuff that they can't relate to, that's dissimilar. And it turns out that dissimilarity at the beginning looms larger than similarity. Right. Dissimilarity is more of a turn off than similarity is a turn on. So you can see that the more stuff you have, the greater the chance for these dissimilarity cascades.
Right.
So you want to have fewer attributes, something that's fairly unique but probably well received. Obviously, photos matter too, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But then the other thing I think that people so studies have looked at dating profiles. I love my field of science. Is it science? It is science, but it's also fun. It can be science and fun, right?
Fun.
Yeah, okay. So only one of the things that distinguished the profiles that got more hits than the ones that did not was the ones that got more hits, in addition to having less information, they expressed some kind of interest in getting to know the other person. So and it was 1% of profiles on average that did this. And by that I mean, you're like, how do you do that in a profile? Like you say like, oh, I'm into historical nonfiction. What about you? What books do you like reading? So ask a question. And that is great because it signals you're interested in getting to know the other person. You're not just being like, please take me, anyone. And so it also signals that you're discriminating, right? People want to be with people that are picky, right? Because you want to feel wanted and like you're special. And so those are some really good signals. So then what they did in these studies is then when they got people to edit their profiles and do this, they got more dates.
Okay.
So that's at the beginning. The other way that people go wrong at the beginning is they get into these like text banters, right? They just text each other. And when you do that, because you're really motivated, because finding a partner is a primal thing, our minds go crazy and they like fantasize and they fill in the blanks of how amazing this person is in all ways. So the longer you do this and you haven't met them, so it's ambiguous, so your brain is going crazy and making shit up, when you meet the person, you're more likely to be disappointed, right? And this isn't actually the person, right? When you're texting, it's
but that's
curated.
the trap, because vulnerability over text is so much easier.
Exactly, 100%. There we are, full circle. That's the trap. And so what you need to do is you need to go and meet the person. And you can be ruthless too. Like I was a little bit ruthless. Mid-30s, my eggs weren't getting any younger. So
okay.
what
was ruthless to you?
Sorry, you are a enlightened bro. You've come around
full circle. Yes,
exactly. So
Dad,
I can say that exactly. Okay, so I would arrive and see, and I'd walk past the bar or the coffee shop, and I'd look in, and if the person was not as advertised, I'd just keep on walking.
Okay.
Like, so you have to have like kind of a good photo of yourself, but realistic. And that's okay. Like, it's okay if someone is misrepresenting themselves.
Goods.
Right? They misrepresented.
Yeah.
Like, you don't owe them anything. Okay, so then should we go to dating, or do we have more thoughts? I can see your thought bubbles.
Yeah, there's a happy middle here.
Yes.
Right? So there's the guys oftentimes in these apps will rush to just put anything up and get to the swiping and the matching.
Yeah.
And then there's no vulnerability.
Right.
And they're just like every other generic person
Right.
who likes beach and
Right.
enjoys the
Has
sun.
the puppy.
Has read a book. Okay, well, so is everyone, right? So there's too little information that's not
Right.
going to get you the right match. And then there's too much information that's going to create the dissimilarity.
Yeah.
So what should we choose to put out about ourselves
Yeah.
that's going to spark
Right.
enough vulnerability but not...
Right. That's a great question. I think one thing that I found helpful was actually giving my profile to a very dear male friend of mine.
Okay.
And being like, so he caught up on, so for example, I had the word quirky and he's like, quirky, not good.
Yeah.
And so if you have a really close friend who can be like, oh, those are like, you want to go for like alluring traits. Like curiosity-inducing
Or maybe
traits.
that's not you. Like maybe that's not how they would describe you, right?
But
Oftentimes we have a bias
Right.
of ourselves that might not be
totally.
attractive to other people.
Completely. You're right. We have our own. And so if you can have something like, ask me about my favorite ice cream flavor. So that's lame, but something a little bit more curiosity-inducing. That's also alluring, right? In a profile. So that's and then you can also experiment. Like I view getting these decisions right as a campaign. It's not a one shot. Like I literally experimented when I was online dating. I would try different things of saying, and I actually had a spreadsheet, but you don't have to go that far.
You were split testing your dating profile.
I think it was like, it was a safety blanket. It was a way of coping for me, right? Of putting structure on a really hard, uncertain
Well, that's the nice part
right?
about it. When you actually go to the spreadsheet route and it becomes data, it's less personalized, right?
Yeah,
you're not
totally.
feeling personally rejected. It's like,
Right.
oh, well, my
That's
profile got
information.
rejected.
Yes.
All right, let's swap it.
Yes, exactly. And then, do we want to keep talking about dating? Or?
So we get the date.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, again, and this has changed quite a bit
Yeah.
in my own life. And I didn't get into online dating. Thankfully, I met my partner before.
How did you find your partner?
At a pool party in Las Vegas.
Oh, amazing.
Yep.
Lovely.
Labor Day.
Lovely.
David Guetta, Encore Beach.
Nice.
Happened to be, she was on a bachelorette party. I was with friends.
Great.
We bumped into each other in the pool.
Amazing.
Now, obviously, not every love story is like that. And
Right.
many of us are going online to do our dating, to find our partner.
Yeah.
But what also happens with online is, well, we're going to look this person up.
Yeah.
We're going to see what their Instagram is. We're going to see
yeah.
how vulnerable they were online.
I know.
Right?
Jeez. Yeah.
And then I found, especially with a lot of our clients, we will do this where we will overfill ourselves on their online vulnerability and then come to the date and not know what to talk about, know too much about the other person and not know what to share ourselves, and figuring out where the vulnerability on the first date that sparks enough attraction for the second date.
Yeah.
I think that is a struggle for a lot of us, as now we've seen more and more information about us proliferate online.
Right. And so I think maybe one of the lessons there is try to resist the urge to do too much Googling. And also there's different facets of people, right? Like, well, my husband later admitted to having Googled me a lot before the first date, which I guess he stuck around, so I guess it's okay. But
so he liked what he found in the results.
Yeah, I mean, or overcame it. I don't know. But, like when the way when I'm teaching MBA students, it's a different side of me than when I'm playing with my kids.
Your LinkedIn would be different than your Instagram.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of hard to adjust for that. We know it cognitively, but it's hard to adjust, especially when it's a first impression, because first impressions are super sticky.
Yeah.
So try not to. That's why I always say, like, you got to just go meet the person. You learn so much in like 45 minutes with the person. You can tell. You can really tell in the first 5 minutes, I think, if you've got. I've become more of a hopeless romantic after this. I used to be like, there's no such thing as love at first sight. And now I'm like, oh, swoon. Maybe there is.
Well, what does the science say? So someone who's crunched the numbers here.
No, I know. So the science says that, so there's something called thin slicing. Have you heard of that? Yeah, it's super classic. Malcolm Gladwell has probably talked about it.
Again, the story, right? We fill in the blank.
Right.
Even with small information.
And so our gut on someone is so powerful that here's an example of how powerful it is. They've done studies where they have videotaped an instructor first day of class, and they have found that the impression that instructor makes in the first 5-10 minutes of class is the strongest predictor of the teaching evaluation score at the end. Yeah. Right? Like, first impressions matter. So do trust your gut. And I do think that, like, as much as I like to science stuff out, when it comes to love, it's not, there's so much we don't know about how it happens. And you just have to trust your instincts too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of something we've evolved to, like,
it's a balance, because we just had a scientist on recently who studies attraction in humans and said the third impression is actually the most impactful, because by the third, we're both a bit more relaxed and comfortable, that our true self shines through.
That's interesting.
The first impression on a first date, where we've done the research, so we're in our head about what we research and then what we want to share vulnerability-wise. So we don't have the best representation of ourselves in that first date or even the second date. The third date is when attraction actually really develops and grows.
That makes total sense. The way I would think about it is the first impression is very powerful. There is signal in it for sure, but you need to keep going. To me, it says, it tells me whether I should keep going with the person or not. And usually if I was in doubt, if I was like, maybe, I would always go on another date, right?
Yeah.
Because of what you just mentioned. And then what happens as you date someone, these rules of less is more, they go away.
Right.
The thing what you want to do, which jibes with what your other expert was saying, is that you want to do the dance of disclosure together. So you want to start. The whole thing is built on sharing, right? So you say something, maybe it's more superficial at the beginning, and then your partner shares something, matches you, or raises you a little bit. And then you keep going, taking turns, getting more and more vulnerable. And that by the third date, if you've gotten pretty vulnerable, like on the third date, I think it was on the second date maybe even, I told my now husband that I was divorced, and that was like a really, really hard thing, right? And I didn't put it in my profile because I'm like, there's a lot of damage, there's a lot of baggage around that word.
Right. So they won't give you an opportunity.
They won't learn me.
Study you, spreadsheet you, crunch the numbers.
All the things. And so I deliberately omitted that. And then on the second date, I told him, and then it was so amazing because he didn't flinch.
Okay.
And he then proceeded to tell me a really, really intimate story about his own life, about his brother, and about how his brother passed. And so that, I'm like, oh, not the sad story was horrible, but the meta, the what we were doing, the
Yeah,
communication,
the level of vulnerability
the
that
level
you
of,
both
right?
felt comfortable
And then
getting at that
then you
second
develop
date.
right, and then you develop feelings and trust and all the good stuff.
So walk us through that, because that I think a lot of our audience members can feel themselves. They have that thing about their past.
Yeah.
And some of us might be divorced, some of us might have kids, some of us
Right.
might be really struggling in our career, and we are sensing like, I should share this about myself, but I also don't want to push the other person away. I like this person.
Right.
What were you wrestling with, and how did you know the second date was time?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I felt the second date was time because, I mean, quite a bit of time had actually passed between the first and the second because we were traveling a bunch. So like that made it feel like it was more of an advanced date than it actually was.
Okay.
But I started to feel like increasingly like it was an omission. And so it started to feel increasingly like a secret I was keeping.
Yeah.
And when you feel that, that's when you need to start thinking about how to reveal, because when you feel it's keeping that's impeding you from developing, from deepening your relationship.
Right.
It's
You're
also
being inauthentic.
Yeah, it's also preoccupying, right? Studies have also shown that when you have something, you're ruminating, you're trying to keep it, like it takes actually a lot of mental work to keep a secret, right? You need to like monitor and like
You're
not go
guarding
near that
everything.
subject, and it kind of, it's very depleting. So, but then I think it also helps for people to think about the way they will share it. And this makes me think of that amazing HBO show, The Rehearsal. Oh my God. Greatest show ever, possibly. Like season 2 is just epically good. Oh, okay.
It's a lot to get through.
It is. It's a lot.
It's intense.
It's intense. It's absurd. It's hilarious. It's deep. It's, oh my gosh, it's everything. It's so good. But I think that people like under prepare in some ways, and they're like, oh, just go off the cuff. But these things are so hard to do off the cuff.
Right.
So, like, for example, when I mentioned to my ex that I thought we should get divorced, I remember sitting in my office, I called him, saying the words out loud, trying it, because that's so helpful. It's also really empowering. You get more confident because you've practiced it. So literally saying the words out loud is something that people often find helpful.
Yeah.
But secondly, I think you also want to think about, to your earlier points, the frame, right? What's the story?
Right.
And the story is really important because you could tell a story of divorce in lots of different ways. So the way, you want it, what I did, there's lots of ways of doing it, but like I wanted to focus on the future, right? I didn't want to be dragged in the past. Nobody wants to talk about the baggage of what happened.
Because then you're litigating it.
Yeah.
And who's right, who's wrong.
Yeah, and that's another thing of like, that is something we do overshare sometimes is gossip and talking negative things about other people. It's not so nice. I'm Canadian, but it also looks bad on you too.
Yeah.
So I knew that I didn't want to do that, but I needed to kind of give him enough of the why, and then think of this the future focus of it and the growth, the upside of it too.
Right. The opportunity for both of you.
Totally.
With this decision.
Completely.
Versus the past and fighting over how we got here.
Right. But it's really hard. I mean, I'm sure you've had moments of like, what are some of your go-tos?
Yeah. So, the most challenging decisions that I've had to make, and then the conversation around that decision, I've put in my phone notes. I've then shared with a close confidant.
Amazing.
This is what I'm planning on saying. This is how I'm feeling. And like, I also want to get a sense for what they're feeling and receiving it.
Yeah.
Because to that frame,
Yeah.
that I know is just so important for you to be persuasive in any argument you're making.
Completely.
What is the frame that you're setting? And I need that feedback, because often in my head, I will assume things. I'm pretty empathetic. I'm introverted. That'll come across differently for me than they would for someone receiving it.
Yep.
So my two best friends, they tend to be a bit more extroverted, and they're open with me sharing these. So I had a really difficult conversation with an ex-business partner, had to go through the divorce of the business, and it was weighing on me, and I knew it had to happen, but having that conversation, how to have it, what to say, I had to note it. I had to practice it first myself out loud, and then say, okay, listen, buddy, can you just walk me through you hearing this? Is there anything I'm missing from this? And then I finally shared that.
And how did it go over?
It's a very tough conversation.
I know.
As much as I like practiced it and felt good about it, it didn't land the way that, I would hope it would. But at the same time, I felt much better prepared in doing it. And I was able to step into that discomfort.
Completely.
Because for me, much like you were sharing, my emotions growing up were pretty disregarded. It was less important.
Yes.
The emotions of the adults in my life, they were the most important.
Yeah.
Mine were dismissed.
100%.
So very often
Yeah.
I will dismiss and bottle up my
Same.
emotions
I do
to
the
protect
same.
someone else's.
Same thing. Yep.
So because of that discomfort around my own negative emotions with this business partnership, I had to step into that negative emotion, own it, and say, this is how I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling it. This is what I think the solution should be. And it didn't go as I had hoped, but I still felt a lot better, and I was willing to do it because I took those steps, the prep and the sharing with someone else.
Right, totally. It's another area where this comes out is giving hard feedback to students. So one of the things, I'm also the official bad guy at HBS because I am in charge of the academic performance committee. So if people are struggling. And it really is, at first I was like, I'm dizzy from all this spin when I first started, and it really is developmental. I'm like, how is this developmental? It really is, because we spend a lot of time, the committee, trying to understand what went wrong, because there's all kinds of different things that can go wrong. And then because we have agency, we can do lots of things to support people.
And there's also a lot of pressure to maintain standards for the graduates and to have opportunities for them after. And if you withhold that feedback, they're stunted in their development. Totally. They don't get work. They don't get what they wanted out of the education. So it is a tough conversation that has to be had.
And I've actually shifted my focus in how I've done these conversations, because when I started in the role, I would start by, like, they always want to know, like, what did I do wrong? And so then I would answer them. And then I realized no answer is ever going to be satisfying to them, because they're hurt. They feel like failures. They're full of emotions. This is not a logical conversation.
It flips immediately to defensive.
Right, exactly. Defend your decision, right?
Well, it's like, okay, you are now telling me exactly what I did wrong. I can think 1,000 different ways where you have the wrong perception. 100%. That's not what happened. Like, completely. Now I want to fight it.
Completely.
I don't want to hear what you're going to say
next. Completely. So now what I do is I ask them questions and I listen. And I realize that, like, a lot of it is they need someone to listen. They're going through something hard. They need to process it. I happen to be the person. They already know in their heart of hearts.
These are top performers. They know when they're not performing. If you got into HBS, you know.
Yeah. And so, but I also, when I do speak, because sometimes they sincerely ask me for once. The first 20 minutes, I'm like, they're talking. And even if they try to get me to talk, I ask them questions back.
Redirect it.
Yeah. And then in the end, sometimes they want my advice or my take. And the way I always lead that is with something that is true and warm. I genuinely want you to succeed, and I know you can. Right? So showing, before you deliver difficult feedback, I've done studies on this. It matters so much to convey
your intent.
Because even though, and it seems so silly in the abstract, because you're like, of course, like I'm like a professional here. Of course I want them to succeed. But again, what
from
feels
your
like
perspective, yes. From their perspective and hearing that, doesn't often
they
feel
don't
that
know.
way.
It's like some scary person. So it'll feel like over communicating, and once I do that, it's so disarming. And then we can, like, really get into, like, oh, how can we get creative with your course selection or whatever? Then it's actually constructive. So.
Well, I think this is a challenge professionally, whether it's in your professional education in pursuit of an MBA, or once you actually get into work. Vulnerability for a lot of people is often misconstrued as transparency.
Yes.
And how do we tell the difference between the two, and what is more impactful in our career to succeed? Right.
That's a great question. I think they're both important in their own ways. So I think of transparency as cognitive openness, as sharing your thoughts. It's like kind of level 1 disclosure. Level 2, deeper, is vulnerability, sharing your feelings. And both are important. Both get us stuff. Vulnerability is, of course, riskier, especially in the workplace.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. The rewards are much greater, even though the risk is greater. And so trying these different techniques of when am I just going to – transparency would be like telling someone your thought process behind something. So it's generally a pretty safe way to go, because it is being open, and you get the benefits of being open without the risks of vulnerability. So, like, if you're in a job interview and – someone asks you, what's your greatest weakness, right? Dreaded question. And suppose you're going to give, like, a quasi-real weakness that you're not so great at speaking off the cuff in meetings. Okay, so you could say it like that, which I wouldn't recommend. Or you could say it with transparency, which would be like, I find that I like to have some notice for meetings, because the way my mind works is that when I have more notice, I can jot down a few notes and I've got kind of the basic structure of logic. Now, you can always ask me in the moment and I'll give you my view, but that's just the way my mind works, right? That's like so reasonable, so relatable, so like this is a human who...
You gave a weakness, but
right. And
it was a much better way to present
also
it.
Than a humble brag of like, I work too hard, I wish, because then it's just like,
I don't know how to turn it
eye
off.
roll, you're just not real. And this way, you're showing emotional intelligence because you understand yourself, which is super baller, and you're framing it in a way that's really like you're on top of it, and it's also showcasing a strength, right?
Yeah,
that you prepare
the
and you
hidden
value
strength
preparing.
is that in another context, I'm even better.
Exactly.
Versus, hey, this is my weakness.
Completely. And now, so vulnerability in a job interview, that would be a riskier thing. Sharing like I get really anxious when public speaking. I would not recommend that in a job interview.
Yeah, I've once cried on stage.
Peed my pants on stage.
Now we're getting to vulnerability that's too much.
Right. But even then, there's still some times where you would be surprised at how vulnerability, like you wake up with a disclosure hangover the next morning and then you realize that there's actually a lot of redemption. I think some of the problem in how we think about disclosure, opening up, keeping mum is kind of like a one-shot thing that like it's or a binary that is either good or bad, but the effects are multiplicitous. Is that a word? So like, sharing an embarrassing story may make you feel regret in the moment and feel embarrassed, but this is what happened to me when we were going around a circle late at night in a conference and people had the great idea of like, let's share our most embarrassing story ever. And I was a baby academic and there were some super senior people in the field there. And everyone was like humble braggy, like, And then I decided, because maybe I'd already had a little too much to drink, to just go for it and share my actually most embarrassing story. And so the next morning I just, oh my gosh, what did I do? Career suicide. Oh my gosh, can't show my face ever. But then it turned out that the two super senior scholars there became two of my closest mentors. Like one of them is a super close friend of mine. And I think it might have been partly because of that, So yes, there are downsides, but it's not all or nothing, right? There's often surprising upsides.
I think the problem in a lot of these situations is the redemption is further in the future
completely
than that emotional state that you feel immediately after the morning after. So
Yes.
that redemption will come, a year later where they're like, I'll publish that paper with you. Or, I'd love to tell you about this new job opportunity that just opened up at the university. But oftentimes in the moment, after you've had a couple too many glasses of wine and you shared that thing and everyone was aghast and no one else shared anything like that, you can feel that weight for months.
Right. And moreover, when it's not like my bestie said to me, when you told me that embarrassing story, let's do a collaboration now. Let's do a research. It's not linked to that, right? Because
Never.
it's just a je ne sais quoi vibe that they get and that grows and blossoms. And so I think that that's where the work on emotional processing, putting thoughts in feelings into words can really help you in those really tough moments. Also, just general things like working out. I find working out is like probably one of the best forms of therapy ever.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing like a HIIT workout to just
clear all of that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this vulnerability because for our audience who's very analytical, they love frameworks.
Yes.
And you have a great 2x2 matrix that I think will help us as we start to think about the different contexts where vulnerability is so important.
Right. So what we want to think that when we think about whether to share or not to share, as I said, the number one thing we worry about is the risk of revealing. And we are great at telling stories and catastrophizing that. What we need to force ourselves to do is to consider 3 other considerations. There's actually 4 considerations. This is where the 2x2 is, angel singing. So one of the axes is reveal or conceal. The other one is pros and cons. So you get all 4 combos. There's pros of revealing, pros of concealing, cons of revealing, cons of concealing. And the reason why I like to actually draw the diagram is because when you think about it, you will see that you're filling up the one quadrant.
Always.
And you have to, seeing is believing, seeing those empty quadrants
stretches you to start to think outside of it.
Exactly. And so I have found it in my own life to be a very helpful framework. I'm not suggesting we do a full 4-quadrant reckoning for everything, but I would suggest trying it for a few, and then you start to do it more naturally.
Yeah, I think oftentimes in these situations, we know that there's risk with the vulnerability. We're already thinking about it. So why not draw the matrix, right?
Yeah.
It's not every vulnerable situation
Right.
where I got to think, okay, I need a matrix. But we know when those moments are arising that, okay, I should think through how I disclose this and why it's important.
Yes. And the how is important too, right? The how can shape, if you do it in a certain way, you can mitigate the risks.
Right. So let's unpack that how.
Right.
You had a great example from the
Yes.
job interview, but there are these other
Yes.
situations where we've been in where we screwed up. We hurt our partner. We frustrated a friend. We disappointed our boss. And how we frame it and how we share that has a big impact on whether or not we heal, whether or not we can move forward from it.
Yeah. So one thing that I think is really important that we sometimes overlook is timing. I found that in my own marriage to be really helpful, where if you're having a tiff, a little argument or misunderstanding, and you try, I'm not capable of this. Maybe some amazingly self-actualized person can do this, but I'm not capable of having a conversation about it when our lizard brains are active. So what I do now is I keep notes. Everything is on my phone. I write a note, and then when we're calm, when we're maybe having a drink, every Friday night is date night. We have a nanny hired by default. So if we don't go, we still pay for it. So it's like forcing mechanism. Yeah, like when you're calm and relaxed, and you can talk about it even with humor, right? And learn more. So timing is important. So don't. It's off, and sometimes we feel like we're trapped, like we have to do it now. It's now or never. It's usually not. Take a breath. Think about the next conversation. Pause.
Well, let's talk the flip side though, because timing does work both ways, right? So in the moment, we might not be able to solve it, but you wait a year.
Oh, you can't.
And then you're like, hey, I got to talk to you about the toilet paper.
Yeah, right. The moment's gone.
That date night is not going to be a fun one.
Right. Although I dare say, we can probably make any topic fun. Like toilet paper, that's an easy one. Did you know, here's a fun toilet paper. Did you know that there are two types of people? And it's a very stable individual difference. I don't know if it's 50-50, but some people are folders of toilet paper when they use it.
Okay.
Go number 2. And others are scrunchers, right? So Paul Rosen, he's a psychologist at Penn. He's one of my favorite. He's in his 80s. He is amazing. He's so good at like that je ne sais quoi, capturing human behavior, right?
Yeah.
And then when he does this talk, when he tells you can see everyone in the crowd is like, yeah, like everybody knows what they are, right? So anyways, even toilet paper can be interesting, but I digress. What are we talking about?
So the timing of the vulnerability. So in the moment, yes, it's heated, there's emotions.
Yep.
But then there's also probably a hangover if we go too long and not sharing that. Because now we're withholding something that's bothered us, that's frustrated us, that we've done to wrong the other person, hurt them.
Yeah.
And that makes us look bad and withholding.
Yeah, completely. So there is a sweet spot for sure. You want to do it, maybe one way to think about it is like as soon as you can after lizard brain is deactivated, after you've cooled off a little bit.
You've processed the emotions
and you have
healthily.
time, and there's no like children running around. That's another tricky thing is
so there's another
time.
Context for our audience who are now accelerating in their career. And we often find a lot of our clients have moved from individual contributor to now leadership role.
Yeah.
And we've heard the adage, share your flaws as a leader. It makes you more endearing. It gets the troops on your side. But it's hard.
For sure. And risky.
Very risky. And often much of what got us to that leadership role was not sharing the flaws as an individual contributor, was selling ourselves and being visible and taking the lion's share of credit to get that spot. And now we're in a leadership role, and the advice is share your flaws.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I say to when I teach executives is less pitching, more listening. So leaders should spend far more time listening than they should pitching. So in fact, pitching, like studies have also shown on persuasion, if you want to persuade someone of your idea, it's generally more effective to do it by asking them questions,
To
right?
lead them to that conclusion.
Studies on sales calls where they've analyzed the number of questions the salesperson asks is strongly positively related to closing the deal, right?
Yep.
Less pitching, more asking. So that's like the general mindset. And also that in and of itself increases trust and employee rapport, because when you ask someone, like to be a good listener, you have to also elicit information by asking them. And when you ask someone questions, you learn objective things about the true state of the business, but they also feel like you like them and trust them because
They're
you're
more
asking
invested.
them, right? Totally. So that's a huge thing. But then when it comes to this, like share more, tell your vulnerabilities, yes, it can be incredibly powerful. We've done lots of studies with executives where they have shared just a little bit more than what they think they should. So, for example, if you are one study, we asked executives to write a list of their positive traits and then their negative qualities, and then we said, which of these would you say in a self-introduction to a new team? And of course, like everyone says we'd share the positives and no one says they'd share the weaknesses. That makes sense intuitively, I guess. But then in another study, we actually forced them to. We said, okay, now you're going to put a weakness in there. You're going to do it and you're going to like it. No. And what we found was when they did that, the employees trusted them more. They were more motivated to work for them. They were better employees. Now, I'm not saying share anything. So we also, I love my job, did a study where we what's the tipping point, right? At what point is it TMI? And conceptually, one way I think about this is leaders have kind of a longer leash on vulnerability than when you're still climbing up the ranks in the following sense. When you are vulnerable at work, a main concern is that people are going to think you're not competent, right? And competence is king. I mean, warmth is important too, but competence in a leader is obviously essential, as is warmth in my opinion. But at any rate, so that's why we're kind of reticent to do it. But once you are already a leader, you are already a high status person, you already have like a wealth of competence. You've got this competence capital. Yeah. And so the idea is that when you take one little bit of vulnerability, like a grain of salt, like it does nothing to your competence. It does not. And so that's the kind of logic. But if you take a giant boulder of vulnerability, then you may start putting a dent in it.
Right.
So
saying I lied on my resume to get all of this competence.
Right. Well, that's an interesting case too, because the immoral things, those almost never get you revealing those. I mean, it's best to just not do them.
Right.
So, but suppose, okay, if we say like a work-related weakness, like sometimes I get nervous public speaking. What we did in this study was we actually had different scripts. We started with like the most tame, which is still vulnerable. I sometimes get nervous public speaking, a leader saying that. And then the next version was like, I sometimes get nervous public speaking and sometimes my mouth gets dry. I sometimes get nervous public speaking, my mouth gets dry, and sometimes I get full-on panic attacks. So we're like, what's the tipping point? In those three examples I just gave, the first one, people still trusted the leader, didn't think competence took no hit. Even the second one, saying I get nervous public speaking and my mouth sometimes gets dry. Like that second level also didn't decrease. It was the third. So the point here is that the line isn't going to be the same everywhere, but the line I've always found, almost always, is further than you think it is, especially in leadership. And so the reason that opening up in this way helps is like it makes you relatable. It makes you human. It also, there's another amazing study that has shown that another tricky thing with leaders, in addition to being kind of perceived as aloof and out of touch, which revealing helps with, is getting feedback, right? Getting real honest feedback, right? It's hard to get honest feedback as you become higher status. And so what these researchers did in a study is they got half of managers to do the usual way to their employees. These were 360 feedbacks, and say, I can take it.
Just tell me.
Please just tell me. Well, yeah, right. Would be like, as an employee, I'd be like, dude, no. Yeah. Or dudette. But the other half of people, the other half of managers, they said, just share something you're working on and then elicit feedback. Right.
So identify something that you've already found.
Right.
And say
Yeah.
I'm looking to
Right.
improve
Right.
here. So it frames it
Yep.
and it creates the psychological safety
Exactly.
for the person
And it
who's lower
shows
status
you can
to share.
take it. It shows you can take it,
Yeah,
right?
'cause
Yeah,
you're
it's
aware
not
of
just
it.
lip service. Yeah, completely. And so that was a real wow for me when I learned that result.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we don't realize the weight of our status as we
Yes.
are minted a leader, we're certified a
Yeah.
leader, we're given this role and now given
Yeah.
team members.
How do
and
you
it becomes,
get feedback on, like, if you wanted
So
feedback?
that exact
Right.
thing. I didn't do the research. I didn't do the
yeah.
study.
Well, you have a
but
really good read.
I
Yeah.
recognized very early
Yeah.
on. So when I left graduate
Yeah.
school to start the company and
Yep.
got thrust into a leadership role, I didn't
And you
study.
need feedback.
Yeah, and I knew that I was screwing up. Like I knew that I was screwing up as a leader because I had no experience. It was
Yeah.
all new.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the company rolling.
Yeah.
And I recognized that in those moments where I was like, all right, we're going to do 360 feedback. And I felt really good giving everyone their feedback. And I'm like, all right, come on, I can take it.
Right.
I'm ready for it. I crave it. I care
Yes.
about it.
Yes.
I want to be a better
Yes.
leader. And crickets.
Oh,
And I was like, this is not what I'm looking for.
Right.
And then I recognized, okay, well, what if I just share outside of the 360 meeting what I'm working on, areas of growth for me.
great.
I'm working on being a better listener. I'm working on my public speaking. I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on my radio voice. So I got a coach for this. And then they're like, oh, hey, check this out. Or, oh,
Yeah.
here's a little bit of feedback. And I'm like,
Awesome.
wow, okay. So as a leader, framing what I'm working on, what I'm
Yeah.
open to feedback on,
Yeah.
actually gets that honest feedback.
Did you find that it changed their receptiveness to you giving them feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it, not so much in the 360 like structured,
Yeah.
but in the off the cuff moments.
Those are the best moments, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
there's a recency thing, right? That's what I was getting at.
Right.
And this is a framework that
Right.
I'd love your thoughts on. So, you know, our clients love frameworks to operate
Yeah,
with,
I
and
love them
especially analytical introverts.
Yeah.
And we work mostly with men. So this vulnerability piece,
Yeah.
you know, stiff upper lip, stoic,
Right.
you know, don't what to share, what not to share.
Yeah.
And I think for our clients, what has worked really well, I like to think of vulnerability as like an onion.
Yes.
And the
that's such a
outermost
great analogy.
Layer
Yeah.
of the onion is your past. So like what happened in your childhood, maybe in school, your past experiences in your career, starting there often, many of us have those same experiences in our past. And yes, it feels vulnerable to share, but it's still a lot easier than saying, here's what's happening in my present.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling as a dad,
Yes.
or I'm really struggling with work.
You're so right.
To say that on a first date, to say that with someone you're trying to become friends with, something that you're currently struggling with, there's a lot more vulnerability and weight,
Yeah.
and it has an
It's-
opportunity to
For
be
sure.
too much.
For sure. Completely.
And then the third innermost layer of that onion is your future, your hopes and dreams. It's like, I want to turn this company into a publicly traded company. If I said that on a first date, that's way too much
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
They're going to be like,
yeah.
what are you saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like to think of my vulnerability of like, all right, start with my past, how I got here, what are those experiences, then what are my thoughts, values, beliefs, and then the innermost, like what are my hopes and dreams and fears?
Yeah.
Those carry the most weight, so I protect them the most. I don't share those
Right.
vulnerabilities with
Right.
everyone.
And I think that's part of being like a high functioning human in society is like knowing, you know, not someone, when you get to the real core, you have to have established a relationship with someone usually, right?
Yeah, and I think that creates the deepening of that relationship.
Completely.
So if you're on the second, third date, start looking at those inner layers of the
Yeah.
onion to peel back. Like,
Exactly.
what do you want that future to be? Do you want a
Right.
family? How many kids?
Right.
What do you really want out of life?
Right.
You know, not on the first date.
Yeah.
Not on the profile.
Right. Yes, totally. And coming back to dates for a sec, but this is like in general, people just don't ask enough questions on dates or in general, in my view. And so it was always really surprising to me how people like that asking questions is an integral way to get reciprocity going. And so there's an instinct that people have. It's kind of ironic where the more, again, this is also related to less pitching, more asking, the more you are like attracted to someone on a date, I experienced this myself, the more I was like,
Tell me more. Yeah.
no, me telling them, right?
Okay,
Me
so more
sharing
you're
them
offering
because
it.
I was like selling. I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
And then the guys I wasn't so into, I would just like ask them questions. And then the like exact opposite happened. I was getting the text from the guys I didn't want and
Right.
And then I realized, oh, wow, yeah, you really sometimes it doesn't come naturally to really ask those questions and elicit disclosure in someone else.
Yeah, we talk about that in our courses, the buyer-seller dynamic.
Yeah, interesting.
And I think oftentimes when we are trying to wow someone, impress them, influence them, we switch into seller, talking about our accomplishments, our experiences, why we're so great.
Right.
And we don't think about being the buyer. But it's actually higher status to be the buyer, soliciting the information to make the judgment on versus saying, hey, here's how awesome I am.
It's also another thing that comes to mind. So this question asking work is my amazing colleague and bestie, Allison Brooks. She's done a ton of work on question asking. And one of my experiences with it was I am introverted and so somewhat socially anxious too. I bet those often co-occur. And so going to dinners with, visiting professors, people I didn't know, and it's like hoity-toity, and I would feel anxious about them. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, I can ask questions. I don't need to make conversation. Just be curious and ask questions. And then it made my social anxiety just completely went away because I realized all I have to do is ask questions. So that was kind of a cool life hack that I stumbled upon.
I think the stumbling block there for a lot of our clients and audience members who we've shared this with is the false narrative then that it becomes an interview.
Oh, so you got to be careful about that.
What are you doing
for sure.
with the information you're soliciting?
For sure.
Do you value it? Do you validate it? Does it mean something to you? So I think we have to, it's great to prepare questions.
Yes.
It's great to, in conversation, use questions, but we always share the real relationship happens when you ask the question, you listen to their answer and value it, and then have a statement after about what that answer means to you.
Right.
Can you relate to it? Is it interesting to you? Do you care more? Instead of falling into the question.
For sure.
Because we've all been on that first date where we get asked a ton of questions. We don't hear anything about the other person.
Yeah.
We now can't even decide, is there anything here? Am I interested in them?
What I would also say, though, is I would empower your listeners. If you feel like it's an interrogation, grab the reins, ask a question back.
Yeah.
Well, how does this strike you? How does this jibe with you? Do you have a different experience, right?
I realize I've been answering so many questions. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you can even make a meta comment like that. Totally. And then they'll be flattered and happy. But what were we just talking about before this?
So that reciprocity, that balance is key here.
Yeah, it really is key. Another thing that I was thinking is thinking of more business contexts, and one core application of this is negotiation. And I teach negotiation all the time. And again, I'm always saying to my executives there, more asking, less pitching, more same thing applies there. Yeah. But I think that people often ask me in a negotiation, think of these really fraught business negotiation. Although frankly, I think the negotiations with children at home are and in-laws and siblings, those are much harder. But anyways, I digress. So there's a lot of money on the line. It's really fraught. It feels zero sum. So in order to get good deals, you do have to share information. Yeah. But you have to be careful. And so then people are like, well, what do I share? I can't share. It'll weaken myself, but not everything will weaken yourself. The single thing that you want to make sure to share and elicit in them is what they value, what they care about.
Right.
And we often forget about that. We get too much into the numbers, what do you value? What do you care about? And people will often say I want a higher salary or whatever. Well, you have to get under that. That's a position. Okay, why do you want the higher salary? Right. What will you spend the money on? Because when you're able to tell people that, when they understand you like that and when you understand them, that's when you can make win-win deals, right?
Yeah, it opens up the playing field to so many other opportunities.
Completely. And then it's also more fun, too, than this awkward, contentious, zero-sum negotiation.
And for some times, that salary is tied to a title that they actually care more about.
It's
time
status.
Off and time with their kids that they care more about.
Yes.
But if we just say, okay, it's salary, and we don't ask any other questions, then we only have one thing to actually negotiate on.
Right, it's so tight. And that's almost often the hardest thing, right? Yep. Salary. And so it's interesting when I ask more of my MBA students when they come in with their job offers, cool, it's amazing. And then they're like, I want to get another $20,000 on a $400K salary. And I'm like, do you? Money's great, but why? And they get flustered sometimes. So like they hadn't, and I'm like, why? And consider like how you ask and how you're going to come across. This is a new employer. Like, I'm not saying don't negotiate. I'm just saying, like, what do you really want?
Right.
It's a little crass to just be like,
And sometimes it's just because, well, my classmate got it.
Right. And
or I heard of this other offer from
then
Stanford. And it like,
total. Then I feel like I'm like a psychologist, bad one. But like, because then they start saying these things. And like my friend, I'm like, yeah.
But it's just one of those things that we can, force rank ourselves on, compete on. So it feels like, well, then I just got to ask for it. Someone else got it.
Right. Oh, another thing I was thinking when you were talking about like, how do you know, like, how to do it? Like, when did we talked a bit about timing, and we talked about the story, and we talked about practice, and we talked about framing, all of which are amazing. Another thing, it's a bit quirky, which is the physical environment we're in. So that can have an enormous effect on people's comfort opening up. Studies have looked at, they put people in, they call it a hard room, which is, as you imagine, like cinder blocks and fluorescent lighting, versus a soft room. Like, this is, oh my gosh, I love this room. It's such a soft room because it's a cozy, there's carpet, the lighting, if there's kind of warm lighting, these features of the environment that you'd be like, what? That's crazy.
Right.
They actually, studies have shown, like randomizing people to cold room, warm room, people are more comfortable opening up, and they kind of take difficult things more in stride. So even that, like, is there a pillow there?
Okay. What about body language? Because this is another
that's
thing
another category
that we talk about with our clients. Is oftentimes we will put ourselves in what we call positive body language, fully facing the other person.
I mean, we're kind of closed right now, but yeah.
And in that positive, where I'm giving you my full attention, and I'm right on you, it creates more of an impediment to being vulnerable. We feel fully judged when we're being fully perceived by the other person. Versus side to side, we're angled a little bit out. We call this more open body language. And, if I'm a doctor giving a patient bad news, something really vulnerable, if I'm next to them, it's a much different impact than if I'm directly facing them.
Yeah, definitely. Seating, body language. And this is the cool thing that you're saying is you can orchestrate this by how you choose where to set the furniture. I love doctors who sit down when they talk to you, right? It's so...
Come around and show you the results. Here, let's walk through this together.
Exactly.
And now whatever you're facing, whatever the diagnosis is, you have a team member who's attacking it.
Together, collaborating. Yeah, definitely.
And same thing with first dates. We find often clients will feel like, well, I have to sit across from the person, but actually just moving next to them.
Yeah, interesting.
And being side by side creates more of that opportunity to get comfortable being vulnerable.
Yeah. What do you think about what do you advise your clients on? Is there like a the best date? Like, what should you do on your first date?
So to get to your point around the vulnerability in environments, the best first dates actually have a couple different environments tied together.
Okay.
So can you do a coffee and then a walk, and can you go get your favorite milkshake or groceries, or can you go to your favorite wine shop and then go have a bite? So can you create different environments that will accelerate the environments you've been in together that create the closeness that allow the vulnerability and allow you to open up?
And why does the multiple environments, why is that so powerful? I believe it. I'm just curious.
Again, we are wired to feel more connected to people that we've shared more time and experiences with. And if you can stack the experiences in the first date, you then create a closeness that other first dates don't have.
Yeah. I also love the idea of like doing something together, experiential, because it feels so much more natural then to converse that way than if you're like sitting.
And it takes the pressure off you. If you're an introvert, maybe you're a little socially anxious, if you know you're doing an activity together, then the focal point is not the conversation. It's going to happen, but it's not the focal point.
Completely. Yeah.
And we feel that dinner is a level of intimacy. Watching someone else eat and eating with them creates too much on that first date.
Yes. I was always anti-dinner. I would never suggest dinner for the exact reasons it's too much too soon. Dinner.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on with and especially for a lot of our clients who then are worried about their own physique, they're following diets, they're working out.
I know, there's all that too.
All this going on. It's like, well, where can I take her? Where she's going to find, I'm going to find, they're going to find something that they like.
And then you feel maybe judged for the choices, even if they're not judging you. It feels more nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the first date hack that
it's a good hack.
Even my own meeting my wife, we ended up doing multiple things together. So we went to the pool party, then we had a bite to eat, then we walked around the strip. And just going through those experiences together, it created much more closeness than if I just
Yeah.
had a one spot date.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we wrap here, what did you take out of all of this research as the most impactful for you, recognizing your own revealing and not revealing in these moments?
Yeah. So I learned, and literally as I wrote the book, I learned so much about, I had been doing research on this for a long time, but there's so much more to be learned. Like I just, I went down like, is ecstasy therapeutic? Like there's so many interesting angles that I went down. So I learned a lot, but what I learned most was about myself. And I learned that I even maybe fancy myself an oversharer. But as I wrote the book, I realized that even I, self-professed oversharer, was really holding back on the important stuff, the feelings, the deep stuff. And so it was kind of like a performative oversharing, which wasn't the kind of sharing that I wanted to get better at, right? It was kind of a
Quirky
facade. Yeah.
oversharing.
And it's like fun. And I love, it's a fun thing. Sharing is fun. But, and so the thing that struck me the most was what I learned about romantic relationships and marriages and sharing, and how the dating stuff I find fascinating because there's so many angles and so many micro decisions about what to make. But the thing that really struck me was what I learned about long-term relationships and how they don't, when they fail, it's often not because of some horrible dramatic hurt or affair or something like this. It's more common that people just grow apart. And you hear these statistics on people feeling lonely in their own marriages. And I started thinking, why? Like, what's the role of disclosure in that? And what I learned is that over time, it's very common in marriages for people to stop sharing. And the reason is because over time, we do know our partners better. But our confidence that we know them, our confidence that we can always intuit their thoughts and feelings, our confidence massively outpaces
Reality.
our actual knowledge. And that's where the problem begins, right? Because then we assume and we don't ask and we don't tell. And that, there have been studies that have looked at they put people who have loved each other for years, like they've been in marriages for 12 years, which is longer than either of my marriages. And they only were, like 80% of the time they were wrong in intuiting what their partners were thinking and feeling. And so that to me, it's like this secret sad part of that we can do. It's very addressable, right? The answer is share your feelings. It's going to feel like over communicating. And so that really, really has changed my own marriage.
And with that knowledge, because that also came through in the book to me, is recognizing that maybe our assumptions about the people we're closest to in our life, we aren't right on.
Right.
So don't make that assumption.
Completely.
Like listen more.
Yeah.
Ask the follow-up question.
Yeah.
Don't assume you recognize the emotion, your best friend, your partner.
I think it also makes you more empathic too, because when you don't ask, like maybe I'm just a negative Nelly, but I come up with like, he's trying to hurt me or whatever.
We personalize things in negative ways.
Yeah,
right?
Well put. And then when I ask him, it's like, no, we're just in different universe. He's got a completely reasonable, nice, logical thing.
Yeah.
And so it's made me more empathic, I think, or it makes people more empathic, I should say. I don't want to brag about myself.
Well, thank you for stopping by.
Thank
Where
you
can
so
our audience
much.
find out about the book?
You can take, so there's some quizzes that might be
Yes.
fun on my website, proflesliejohn.com. And then you can buy the book anywhere books are sold.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.